important part of their life. I mean, water's important to us all, of course, but in a desert situation, wells were imperative. They actually represented a place, an important place for the people. Actually, I just remembered I forgot to do something. Last week I mentioned that Lottie Benton went to be with the Lord this week, and last week, and her funeral will be on Tuesday down at Bethel Funerals at 1 o'clock next Tuesday. Sympathies go to Jeanette and family and Conrad's in today as well. So if you'd like to attend that funeral, it's on 1 o'clock on Tuesday at Bethel Funerals. Okay. Sorry, I kind of forgot to do that. You know, this is an important story because Isaac was redigging something that his father had inaugurated as it had been stopped up. You know, this story really represents a thing for us as a people that I believe God wants us to understand, that wells are spiritual inheritances. They're things that God desires to pass generationally along. And I believe that God desires to dig again the wells in Frankston. Who believes that? You know, we're a city, and for those of you who've heard the story, and I'm not going to labour it today, but we're a city that's actually built upon natural wells. In the early part of the early season of our city, there was quite a number of wells that were around about Frankston, and they had this this mineral in the water, apparently called chalybeate. And chalybeate is actually known as a healing mineral. People would come from all over the place to come to Frankston to bathe in this water. Apparently the water smelled. It had a bit of a sort of a sulphur type smell to it. So it was actually blocked up in the 1930s, and they came and they actually blocked up the wells. But the wells were actually natural wells that were occurring right across the city. In fact, there was even a particular well here that the water came out of the ground, and it was effervescent. Is that the right word? Because it had bubbles already in it. And so there was actually a company here called the Frankston Aerated Mineral Springs Company. And they would actually bottle this aerated water that would come out of the ground. So I believe there's a prophetic picture about the heritage and the destiny upon our nation upon this city. And it's interesting to me that these wells were stopped up in a former generation. But I believe God desires to redig again the wells that are in this city, the wells of revival. On the front of the newsletter today, I actually quoted something that I'm going to share a little bit about. I want to tell you a story. Around about 17 years ago, we were called City Life Church. And we were only a church that had been going for a few years. And we used to meet upstairs in the building right in the middle of Frankston. I know there weren't many of you that are here today that were with us back then, but we were upstairs in the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence building. And here we are again in the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence building, all these years later. But the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence were ran like a big op shop, and we negotiated with them, and we leased the entire upstairs, and we moved the church into Frankston, and we've been given a prophetic word, a very powerful word. We've been meeting in Seafair now, and we've been given this word from quite a renowned prophet that God was going to put us into Frankston, and He was going to give us a place, and we were always to maintain a place in Frankston. And it was going Uniting Church in Australia was a combination of several different denominations. The main ones were the Methodists and the Presbyterians. They joined together. There was another group as well, but the two big ones were the Methodists and the Presbyterians. So often in a town they would have two distinct churches, and what would happen is they would both become uniting churches as they would maintain these two churches. Now, up here on High Street in Frankston, there's two uniting churches. There used to be. So what would happen is they had two original congregations. One was kind of heritage of the Presbyterians, another was the heritage of the Methodists, and they met in this hall, in this building here. And they decided they were going to spend some money on the other building, fix it up, and move out of here and move into it. And I'd heard that from various sources, and they'd be moving out of this church into what's now known as St. Andrews down the road. Now, this building was called Wesley Uniting Church back in 17 years ago. And it was built in the 60s, and I actually thought it was kind of ugly. I'd never been inside. But as I was thinking about that, I sort of asked God whether we would ever be involved in this building. I don't know why I did, but anyway, not expecting this would ever be the case, I got this immediate answer from God, and He said to me that we would be moving to this building as a church, this building 17 years ago. And I said to the Lord, what about the city? We were prophetically told to have a place in the city, that things were going to be city-based. And He said to me, this is an interesting thing that I haven't kind of connected until very recently. He said to me that city care would be given to me, and this would become the city phase for what we had to do. Now, for those of you who don't know, back when we first came to the city here, there was another little ministry running in the middle of the streets called City Care. And it was actually run by the Frankston Life Church, the one that we've just moved out of. But it's interesting because the City Care was actually started by a disciple of mine. It was a young guy that I got saved back when I first got saved. He was a heroin addict, came to Christ, and he started serving the Lord. He went to the Frankston AOG Church, and he started a ministry at the Frankston AOG Church called City Care, because I taught him what I valued. So he went out and did that. His name was Lindsay Wood. And Lindsay came to Frankston, established this thing, ran it for a while, and I was proud of what he did and everything. But then the Lord had told me this particular day that we would be given City Care. Now, to be honest with you, that's exactly what happened. I was offered City Care because it wasn't going so well. And we were in the city upstairs, if you remember, and we were offered this ministry, City Care. And to be honest, I took it over, but what I inherited was a bunch of old junk. There wasn't very much to give me. There was a couple of people that came from it, but there wasn't really much that came with the City Care thing. But I've been thinking about it recently, and I feel like the Lord said to me, Mark, there was a mantle I gave to you in City Care, and it's exactly what you took over. And that's why you've been blessed in the city. And it's really interesting because I hadn't kind of connected those dots before. Back to my story. All this is, I saw it as a bit of a challenge as I struggled to really make sure that it was God. And I believed it to be God, but I sort of left it up to Him. Now, this is my diary. These are notes out of my diary from way back then. Then my next entry was, the next day I found a book that I bought at a faith once. And it was a history of that particular church. This is it here. I don't know why I bought it nor why I kept it. Anyway, it's possibly one of the first churches in the city, and it was originally called Wesley Methodist Church. It was actually Wesleyan Methodist Church. It's now Friday, September 29, 2000, which is 1 week since I had this experience. I pray that if it's not God, this thing would just dissolve from my thinking. However, on the contrary, I keep thinking about it all the time. And you know how you write in a diary. I'm just reading you what I wrote. Now, here we are, next entry, Sunday, October the 1st. I visited a friend, David Norton. There's a mate of mine, a guy who's passionate about the Bible. Some of you may know David. On Sunday the 1st of October, David mentioned that he'd heard that it was a Methodist preacher that had seen the whole of Frankston converted in the early days. Fascinated by this, I got on the internet, and after some considerable searching, found a site that was headed "Whole Town Converted." It was a biography of John Carr, who came to Frankston in 1855, and I quote, "John Carr Sr. adhered to a could see this particular church was once a well, a place where God has moved previously, powerfully moved. I'm reminded of a word now. This is back 17 years ago. I'm reminded of a word the Lord gave me some time back out of Isaiah 58, verse 12. Those who will among you shall rebuild the old waste places, shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called a repairer of the bridge, a restorer of the streets in which you dwell. You know, I made a comment. I wonder if this is fulfilled with this. During that season, I saw a picture as I was praying for this prayer. I just took it up, started to pray, I started to ask God. I saw a picture on this wall over here. Now I'm going to get Jack to put up the picture. The picture, and it was a banner on the wall of the building, and it said, "Redigging the ancient wells." You probably can't read that. Frankston Life, redigging the ancient well. And I believe that's what God showed me back then. There was a well here that God wanted to redig. Now, I actually wrote to the United Church expressing interest in the property, and they hadn't responded. This is the 1st of the 1st, 2001. This week, I finally contacted the United Church. It was a rather supernatural. I found it time to ring them. I felt it was time to ring them, and I got the guy in charge of the building program. And I rang him on Wednesday, June the 20th. He's very pleasant. And he asked me whether I had divine connections. And I asked him, what did he mean? And he said they had a meeting on Tuesday night, the day before, and at 8:30 p.m. and they decided they would seek tenders at the building. And here I rang him the next day. He was impressed. So we came and we inspected the building. At this point it was an old church. 21st of June, it was myself and Sue, Faye Ashman and Michael, her husband, Dorothy Wayne and David and Jenny Morton, who were with us back there. We were all pretty impressed. He gave us the guided tour, looked at everything, he explained they'd be leaving some things like the church fittings, etc. The only thing they would be taking would be the big cross. There used to be a huge cross up on the wall just here. And the stained glass windows, which were all at the back here, they were all taken out. Huge Uniting guys said we could buy the building off them for $1 million. The entire site for $1 million. 17 years ago, probably a lot of money there. Worth a lot more than that now, of course. And so my feeling was that I should write to them and make them an offer, and we did that. We made them an offer which we believe God had given us a price of $1,000 a month, which was a lot for us. And I've written here, my feeling is the Lord will go before us. In the beginning, this was supernaturally imposed upon me. I didn't ask it. I didn't seek it. And the Lord gave it to me. So I feel now I just need to move ahead. And He is able to supply. Well, to cut a long story short, we weren't successful. The United Church got back to me and said, we've decided to lease it to the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. So I instantly thought, well, I obviously misheard God. So I put it away. In fact, I got so frustrated during that whole period, because I've been praying about it for such a long time, that I actually deleted an entire year's worth of my diary out of my diary. It was electronic. I deleted it one night when I was really frustrated, thinking, I'm not hearing God. Anybody ever done that? And when you delete it digitally, it's gone. You know, like it's gone, everything. And this is the only bit that I remember I kept. And the only reason I kept it is I printed it because I showed someone else. So I deleted it out of frustration. And as I said, we were given city care, and for the last season we were sought to build that ministry to the poor and destitute. Just so you know, the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence were actually given quite a few $1 million from the state government to refurbish this building. They built upstairs, they put a whole lot of money into it. They haven't changed this auditorium much. But we were given the old pews. All the pews out of the old building that we just moved out of actually came out of this building. That's where they came from. And when we moved them out of here, there were 5 sections of pews, and they were huge. And there was actually enough room in this, it's hard to imagine, enough room with these pews in this room to seat 400 people. And this building's designed to seat 400 people, according to the architect in this book. We moved from the old library and we moved into Balmoral and Clyde Street. The Lord established this as a house to care for the broken and lost. And you know, the rest kind of history, and I kind of forgot about it, thinking, you know, obviously just didn't hear God. I wasn't hearing God, but I kept this stuff. However, recently the Lord's been talking to me again about this house, about this place. He showed me how they were given a mantle for the city, and I felt the Lord say to me, I want you to go and find out about the Wesleyan Methodists, and I don't know much about this stuff, but it's really an interesting group of people. They based what they believed on Wesley. Wesley was the man who started the Methodist Church. He was an amazing, faithful man of God. And this particular church was established as a beachhead in the city. And he reminded me of the scripture recently he re-gave me out of Isaiah 58. Those from among you shall rebuild the old waste places, you'll raise up old foundations of many generations, you shall be called a repairer of the breach, a restorer of the streets of use. Well, I felt the Lord say to me recently, I had another experience recently, and I felt him say that this was my house. And they let it fall from that place. Several nights ago, I couldn't sleep, and he said to me that this church represents a spiritual well, and the Lord gave them the high ground in the city, in High Street. They were to be his church in this hour and their hour. And the influence, the authority of the Lord came through their hand in the city. It was interesting when if you read this, if you're interested to read this, I'm having a photocopy for it, but you can't get this anymore, of course. I bought it many years ago. But some of the early leaders in this church actually became they actually joined the Frankston Council. They became leaders in our city. This church produced people that had influence in our city. But I felt the Lord say to me that this was lost and compromised and forsaken by tradition and by the hand of man. But God never forgets. And the authority he gave to that congregation was never taken back, even though they forsook their inheritance. And I believe today, friends, that God has handed that privilege to us as a church. I'm not trying to be arrogant by saying that, but I believe that we're going to listen to some people who are going to share some prophetic things with us in a moment. But I believe the Lord said to me as I was lying there the other night, Mark, you're about to step into the destiny that I've called you to have in the city. And I believe he said to me, within the next 6 months, we're going to see significant shifts in the city. About a year ago, we had a woman through our church, and her name was Margot. I don't know if you remember her. She lives in Jerusalem, and she actually prophesied one prayer meeting, and she said, I saw that God is going to give you a higher place. You're the head and not the tail. It'll be a place with his view, and he gives you those keys. He has the keys of death and hell. He will release many captives. I believe the mantle is still here in this place. I believe the mantle of authority in the city is in this place. And I believe it's because God has set it aside. So I felt the Lord saying, so do this out of the way. I have a bit of a prophetic act. I'm going to relight the candle. I felt the Lord say to me that the candle had gone out yet, but he wanted to relight it. So I want to invite you, maybe you'll gather up front as we do this. It's just that final thing, but I know this is a sensitive story, but I feel like God's saying this is a candle of eternity. I feel this place will burn again in the presence of God. Amen. But Father, by faith, we relight the candle today. That this church, Lord, would burn again. And Father God, this place would be a place where your glory would come. Father, that this candle, Lord, would burn in this place. It may not physically burn, but Lord, there'd be a candle burning again in this house, Lord. Well, God bless you, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I hope we share our excitement. We'd like to invite you to stay for lunch. It's right up the hall. There's heaters are on up there, so it's nice and warm. We have homemade soup and